After being delayed a season due to the coronavirus pandemic, NASCAR's Next Generation Cup Series car has debuted. Take a look at it there. The Ford, Chevrolet, and Toyota branded vehicles making their debut next year on the track in Daytona. I'm Fox News Auto's editor Gary Gastelou, and joining me in the Fox Garage to talk about it is NASCAR Senior Vice President of Racing Innovation, John Probst. Good to see you.
Thank you, Gary. Pleasure to be here.
So I want to get into some of the nitty gritty on the technology side, but real quick, give me the highlights, the breakdown, what's different on these compared to the current cars.
Yeah, sure. We're really happy to be able to take the wraps off what's been a really long project for us starting back in 2019. As you mentioned, we did get delayed for the coronavirus there, but what you're seeing is essentially the culmination of some of the best minds in engineering that work in racing, from NASCAR to Goodyear, our teams and our OEMs. Putting together a pretty collective effort that we hope puts, and it should put, a lot of the control of how our cars perform in our drivers' hands, with an emphasis on a lot of the strategy and pit stops and vehicle setups, along with the folks that they have, their team, if you will, at the racetrack. And some of the highlights of what you're looking at there is a much slicker race vehicle for us. It's more coupe versus sedan looking. You'll see the roof is a good bit lower. The tail is a good bit shorter. We've got some 18-inch wheels on there, which lets Goodyear put softer, grippier, larger contact patch tires on it. The cars will have a composite body on them now, which will let our drivers bump and bang and get up into the wall without some of the negative effects that the current car gives them. So we're looking for much more aggressive racing than what we have today. And our whole goal with this car is to raise the bar for our racing, which is no short task, because I think right now we probably have some of the best racing we've ever had in the NASCAR Cup Series.
Independent suspension, 5-speed sequential gearboxes on these. They're almost like a lot of road racing cars. You've been doing a lot more road racing in the series. What was the cart before the horse here? Did you design these cars so you could do that? Or once you started working on these cars, did you say, you know what, we can drive it a lot more than ovals with these things?
I mean, great question. I think that, we do see an increased emphasis on road courses in our sport, and that's largely because that's what our fans are asking for. When we looked at the vehicle and started basically from a blank page, we're saying, okay, what attributes do we want this car to have? And one of them was to be more symmetrical. One of the things today that our cars, and I'm talking on ovals at the moment, have is, an offset tail, which creates a lot of unique aerodynamics around that helps the driver when they're by themselves, but when they're in a pack, a lot of times that's what upsets the car, is just losing in the changing of that asymmetry on the body, if you will. Well, it turns out that one of the benefits of making the car more symmetric is, one, not only having less aero sensitivity when we get around other cars, but that a symmetric vehicle works a whole lot better on road courses and street courses. So from that standpoint, bigger brakes help as well. When we put the 18-inch tires on there, we're able to put a much bigger brake package. And we've had some drivers that have done testing for us start braking at their normal brake points, in particular at some of the ovals. They'll say, oh, I always brake at the Sunoco sign. And they'll do that with this car, and they'll be like, my gosh, I almost came to a complete stop before I even got on pit road. So I think that, we didn't start by saying, let's design a road course car. We kind of landed there when we cascaded some of the design requirements that we wanted to do to make the cars more symmetric everywhere, frankly.
IndyCar, of course, has independent rear suspensions, but NASCAR's always had solid rear axles, as do most stock car racing series. So the drivers are going to be coming up and jumping into this on an oval track. From what you've heard from the tests, how much different does it handle than the traditional vehicle as far as the rear suspension part of it's concerned?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of the feedback so far, and one of the feedbacks that I get that I like to hear the most is that, yeah, it's a race car. It's just like another race car, which is kind of what we were looking for. We didn't want them to get into the car and, be blown out of the seat by how different the car was going to be. But I think that one of the probably key learnings that our guys are going to have to go through is they're so used to that solid rear axle and sort of one side being tied to the other. So a lot of the decisions they make with regards to how the vehicle's set up is largely formed from the history of having a solid rear axle. And, when you get the independence of being able to set a lot of your cambers and toes in the rear independent of each other, I think that it might be our teams that have to go through the biggest learning versus our drivers.
There's also the tires. You mentioned the 18-inch wheels, lower profile tires. How are they going to perform compared to the old fat tires that we see on the cars today?
Yeah, I would say so far our testing has been very positive. We've had the car on track 14 times now from every type of track that we race on, from road courses all the way out through super speedways. We've had rookies in the car, we've had champions in the car. So I feel like when you go through the spectrum of all the track types and all the drivers that we've had with all the different tires that we've tried to throw at this car, and by say different tires, they're all 18-inch, but we've gone through, varying sidewall stiffnesses and in some cases, width of the tire. But more than that, it's how soft we can get away with respect to the actual compound itself. And I would say so far, like we're probably trending towards less temperature in the tires than with our current. And I don't know if that is attributable to the fact that we actually have a much larger contact patch now. So while we have a smaller sidewall, it's probably being worked a good bit harder. I think that as the teams adapt their setups in the vehicles, the sidewall won't be worked as hard as it is with some of the test vehicles that we have now. But then the larger contact patch probably just gets the entire tire working in a little better state, if you will, and not generating as much heat.
I know things are going to be a lot different when these are performing in traffic, but as far as out on the track on their own, on non-restrictor tracks where you can kind of compare them, what is the speed like on these on a small oval compared to the current cars?
Yeah, I would say that today, like comparing speed sometimes is useful, sometimes it's not, and it's a lot of times dependent on what tire we have on it. But I would say that more than not, when we go to a lot of these smaller tracks that we've been to, the car's been just a little bit faster than the car we have today, which that wasn't necessarily a design criteria for us, because I feel like as long as we're putting on entertaining racing, I don't feel like the fans are going to be able to detect 5 miles an hour here and there. So I feel like as long as we're putting on really good entertaining racing for our fans, which is our primary goal, that we're not overly concerned about the speeds, certainly on short tracks and road courses.
What about safety? The current car, very safe. Any dramatic changes to what's underneath the skin of these?
Yeah, actually, because it was a clean sheet of paper, our safety department was able to use a lot of cutting edge safety analysis tools to not only set some of the criteria for the design of the car, but then also implement some new features. We've implemented front and rear crash structures, which our vehicles have never had before. So these literally bolt to the front and to the back of the car. And I know that that's a little when we say we're being more production relevant, that is something that you can see on a lot of production cars out there. So we've baked those into this car. We've expanded our use of energy absorbing foam in the car. We've also learned from some of the larger incidents that we've had on track recently, and we've beefed up the center section of the vehicle. So we've moved door bars out, we've capped the back side of door bars, we've added some bars to the inside of the car. And we think that now, like from an intrusion perspective, we've probably almost doubled or more the safety of that cockpit itself.
You are sticking with the same engine formula for this season, at least. Is that to give everybody a step into this without changing everything, or is this an intention that you're going to keep those engines for a couple of years?
That's a good question. I think that we have obviously a lot of change going on with this vehicle, being that it is pretty well a complete clean sheet for all the teams. So we have to manage how much we bite off at one time. I think that when you look at the topology of the engines that are in there, they'll be the same. They have to be modified some to actually fit in the vehicle. However, potentially one of the biggest changes on the horizon would be, and you had mentioned it, the 5-speed sequential transaxle that's in the car. That was targeted not only just to have a transaxle, a 5-speed transaxle in the car, but also that does protect for a potential hybrid solution down the road for us, working with or in conjunction with or in addition to the ICE engines that are in there now.
And is that perhaps a pancake motor that would fit between the engine and transmission?
Yeah, exactly. It'd be a P2 configuration with a motor fit on the front side of the transaxle. In our car, the engine will be in the front, the transaxle will be in the rear, connected with a prop shaft. So this would fit to the front side of the transaxle.
All right, John Probst, Senior Vice President, NASCAR Racing Innovation. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Gary.
And to read more about the next gen NASCAR, head on over to foxnewsautos.com.